Hello, grade 7, this is Mrs. Lopez. Today we are learning lesson 11 in our module 2 and we are understanding how to divide, we are creating rules for multiplying sign numbers. Okay, so just a quick level up from what we've learned in lesson 10, extending whole numbers, number multiplication to integers. So instead of just using um, uh, instead of just using cards, we are going to use numbers, positive and negative numbers. In front of you, you see the coordinate line. And here we have number of matching cards. And here we have groups of those numbers. Okay, so the number of matching cards, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of numbers. And these are the actual numbers. Okay, so if we are adding here, what are we going to do here? Subtract them, right? So this will be our 0, and a -1 will stand for removing cards, -2 will stand for removing 2 sets of cards, -3 will stand for removing 3 sets of cards, -4 will stand for removing 4 sets of cards, and -5 will stand for removing 5 sets of cards. Okay, so when we add one set of one set of one card, it's going to be 1, right? When we add 3 sets of 2, so it's going to be 2 plus 2 plus 2, and it's going to be 6. If we look at 5 sets of 4, it's going to be 20, right? And you can also see here, if I were to shade in the area covered by these numbers, you will see that 1 times 1 is 1, right? 2 times 3 covers the area of 6 squares, right? This is 6 squares, 2 times 3. And if I match 4 and 5 here, the area covered will be whole 20, right? So this is something that we learned in elementary school, how to make area models and how to multiply numbers. Pretty easy. Now let's take a look. What does the quadrant 1 represent? This is our quadrant 1. It represents adding sets of positive numbers, right? So it's what we learned in elementary school. So adding sets of positive numbers. Okay. Now let's look at quadrant 2. Quadrant 2. It's right here. Quadrant 2. Okay. Quadrant 2. Since we were adding sets here, and I mentioned earlier, this will be removing, right? We are going to remove sets of positive cards. So that will represent removing sets of positive cards. Removing sets of positive cards. Let's take a look at what it looks like. When I remove 2 groups of 2, my answer is going to be -4 because I have two groups of 2, right, which is a 4, and I remove that 4, it will result in my score will drop by that 4, right? When I remove 4 sets of 3, my score will drop by 12. When I remove 5 groups of 1, my score will drop by 5. And that's how it looks like. Okay, let's look at quadrant 3. What would quadrant 3 represent? Quadrant 3 also represents removing sets, but now we are looking at negative cards, right? Removing sets of negative cards. Okay, so here we have removing sets of negative cards for quadrant 3. And we can take a look at this. When I remove two sets of cards that are -2, two sets of -2 is -4 because -2 plus -2 is -4. And when I take that -4 away, my score will go higher. So that will be a +4. When I remove three sets of -4 cards, my score will go up by 12. When I remove 4 sets of, let's say, -3 cards, my score will also go up by 12, wouldn't it? Because 4 sets of -3, -3 plus -3 plus -3 plus -3 is -12. And when I take them out, my score goes up by that 12. Okay. And what does quadrant 4 represent? Let's take a look at quadrant 4 right here. Quadrant 4 would stand for adding matching cards, adding sets of negative cards, adding sets of negative cards. So let's write it down, adding sets of negative cards. Okay, and when I add negative numbers, my score will actually go down. So if I add two groups of -2, my score will go down by 4 because -2 plus -2 is -4. If I'm looking at 3 sets of -4 cards, just like I mentioned before, it's going to be -12. If I'm looking at 5 sets of -1, -1 plus -1 plus -1 plus -1 plus -1 will give me -5. That's basically it. So when I add numbers that are negative, my score goes down. When I add numbers that are positive, my score goes up. When I remove cards that are positive, my score goes down. When I remove cards that are negative, my score goes up. Okay. What relationships do you notice between quadrants 1 and 2? So let's take a look at quadrants 1 and 2. Okay. In quadrant 1 and quadrant, I want to say 3 instead of 2. I want to say 3. I'm sorry. This probably is a typo. Yep, it is because here's 2 and 4. So let's take a look at quadrant 1 and 3. Quadrant 1 and 3. So this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 3. What do we do here? Here we add numbers of positive cards, and here we remove cards of remove sets of negative cards. So I'm multiplying positive by positive and negative by negative. Again, that restates that rule that we learned in lesson 10, is when we multiply numbers with the same signs, our score is positive. So both, let's see, I'm not gonna write it down, we just look at them. Here we are multiplying positive sets by positive numbers, negatives, we are removing sets of negative numbers, right? What relationships do you notice between quadrants 2 and 4? Here we're removing sets of positive numbers, and here we're adding sets of negative numbers. So here we have different signs that we are multiplying together. So what rules can we use to determine the products of integers? Let's rewrite those rules again. When we multiply numbers with the same sign, the product is positive. When we multiply numbers with different signs, the product is negative. Okay, let's see um, what application we can do here, just with the numbers, not with the cards anymore. -6 times -5. We are removing 6 groups of cards that are -5. The score goes up. We are multiplying numbers with the same sign, so the product will be +30. 4 times -8. We are multiplying cards with different signs. With different signs, the product is going to be negative. So the answer is going to be -32. Here I'm multiplying numbers with the same sign, even though negative. When we multiply numbers with the same sign, the product is positive. So 63. When we multiply 3 integers, let's take a look. This will be different. Probably need to write down 2 numbers here. 2 numbers. 2 numbers. And I will explain why. So here I'm multiplying 12 by -8 by -7. Okay. Here I have different signs, right? I can say that my product is going to be negative because all the numbers are different. This one's positive, this one's negative, and this one's negative. But let's take a look at this. -8 by -7 will give me +56. So now what I need to do is to multiply 12 by 56, and that is actually going to result in a positive number. 12 times 56 is 672. Okay, see how that is different? Here, according to our rule that we wrote earlier, the numbers all have the same sign, so the product has to be positive. Not going to happen. Why? Because when I multiply -6 by -5, my answer is going to be +30. And now I need to multiply +30 by -4, and my answer is going to be -120. Okay. Here I have -12 times 3 times -2. Don't pay attention to that this sign is missing here, because when we have parentheses, it means multiplication anyways. Okay, so here we have, again, different signs everywhere, negative, positive, negative. However, when I multiply -12 by 3, I will get -36. And when I multiply -6 by -2, it'll be +72. That's why I wrote down 2 numbers with the same sign. Because when I multiply 2 numbers with the same sign, the product is going to be positive. But if I multiply that by a different number, then it might change. Okay? So that's why that 2 numbers is so important. That brings us to exponents. Very quick introduction to exponents here. 2 stands for the exponent. And that 2 is a little bit on top of that 3. See that? 3 is on top of the -5 and 4 is on top of -2. Okay. And that exponent tells us how many times we need to multiply this base number by itself. -3 is the base number. Okay. There is also a difference here. -3 can be written like this, or it can be written like this. What does that mean? Okay. When we have parentheses, 2 is telling us to multiply -3 by itself twice. So -3 to the second power, that's how we say it, or -3 squared, stands for -3 times -3. Okay, both numbers. And that will give me +9, right? However, when this number is written without parentheses, negative also means the opposite. Okay, -3 to the second power written without parentheses says that this is opposite of 3 squared. And that will mean that's the opposite of 3 times 3, resulting in a -9. See the difference? That is important difference. So when we have number written in parentheses with an exponent on top, we are multiplying the numbers by itself with the negative sign. If this number written without parentheses, that negative sign stands for the opposite. Opposite of 3 squared is the opposite of 3 times 3, and that is going to be -9. Okay, -5 to the third power, and -5 is in parentheses, meaning it's -5 multiplied by itself 3 times. And this is just example here. -5 times -5 is going to be +25, and +25 by -5 will give me negative answer, -125. Okay, -2 to the fourth power. That and -2 is in parentheses. So that means I'm multiplying -2 by itself by the -2 4 times. Okay, let's take a look up here. -2 times -2 equals 4. Another -2 times -2 also equals 4. And 4 multiplied by itself will give me +16. So here, when I have -2 taken by itself 4 times, my answer is positive. Interesting, isn't it? So make sure you follow that rule of 2 numbers with the same sign or 2 numbers with a different sign. Okay, this is it for lesson 11. If you have any questions, please message me. If not, please do your homework, and I will talk to you in the next lesson.